Hello, welcome to the Warrant Committee, St. Patrick's Day edition, March 17th, 2025. Karen, can you call the roll?
Okay. We have Tom Caldwell, Steve Rhines is on Zoom, Lori Connolly and Elizabeth Dillon are here, Jay Fundling is on Zoom. We have Andrew Coe, Macy Lee, Peter Mon, Julia Maxwell here, Brian McGuire on Zoom, Aman Nagasi and Ron Sia are here, and Judy Steele is on Zoom. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Karen. Welcome, everyone, this evening. And as you can see by our agenda, we have several things on there to talk about. A lot of them, we have this theme to talk about some of the budget issues coming up for the annual, but we are very lucky today to have our planning board with us for round 2 of Planning Board Warrant Committee meetings. And today we're going to discuss 3 things. 2 we've already seen before, our ADU and site plan that we addressed on the special town meeting, and we're going to talk a little bit about the East Milton overlay zoning. That's also going to be on the agenda for our next town meeting. So that all being said, Planning Board, would you like to come up to the microphones?
There's 3 of us here tonight, so. Hello. Is that microphone available too, or pass my back? Yeah, just so she knows. Great.
We have Meredith Hall, Cheryl Tagayas, and Maggie Oldfield from our Planning Board. So welcome.
Good evening, all.
Good evening. Great to see you. And thank you for making the time as a group to come down and speak at the Warrant Committee.
Absolutely. I feel like it wasn't too long ago that we were together. And I just want to say thank you all to the Warrant Committee, who's been studying these 2 articles so thoroughly and was able to move quickly on the fly before town meeting. I really appreciate the time that you were able to put in before the meeting, taking a look at some of the amendments that had been requested quite last minute. So having said that, I think we're coming back to you with better articles. Our goals are still to make both the ADU and the site plan approval a more transparent, simplified, and just basically a clearer roadmap for a developer or an applicant to come in. The language that the changes that have been made are it's beneficial. I will say one of the things that came in the day before our last planning board meeting was the bylaw, the model bylaw that we had been waiting for regarding ADU articles. So we were able to not only simplify some of the language, but we were able to include language to be consistent with the model bylaw, which we had been wanting to do, but really hadn't had a final version before last week. So now we do have that. So that language has been incorporated. We found some of the definitions, there were some changes, and we wanted to have everything consistent in that. So I think when you're looking through the final version, the final drafts, there's some things that you are going to find that aren't too different than the previous articles. They're going to be things that you've seen before. Most of the language is what you've seen before, just a little bit written a little bit more concisely. The significant thing, which we heard in our discussion with the Warrant Committee, as well as at town meeting, is one of the I think an improvement is the simplification of the site plan approval that an ADU will go through versus what a larger project might need to go through, and under the Dover Amendment. Under the way the current ADU, the language that has been written, and this has been supported, if you saw the meeting that Kathleen O'Donnell attended, she was very helpful in drafting some of this language to make it clear that the site plan that approval process that an ADU would have to go through is much simpler. It is only the language that is within the bylaw itself. It is not the language that is separate in the separate ADU for all other purposes. It is restricted to the language, and we do have an application process still. That is simpler through the ADU article, and some of the design standards are simplified. So that makes it much less intimidating for someone and much easier. We wanted the process to be simplified. And although, we were able to impose reasonable standards, we just wanted to make those really clear. So those two are separated. So site plan approval will not be for our site plan article, will be separate from the review process that an ADU goes through. So I would say that is really significant, and I think that's going to be really important to town meeting for support. I want to make time for you all to ask questions, but if my members also would like to add things that you saw as being significant, that's just sort of an overview that I just wanted to give for changes. And again, I think it's going to be quite familiar when you look through it, and because you all have studied this so deeply that you'll recognize those changes. And I guess then, if the planning board does, I would open it up to the warrant committee for any questions that you might have on either site plan or ADU.
Is it okay if we pull it up on the screen?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Today,
ADU?
do you want to do the ADU first? And
Yeah, I just think maybe if we
Sure.
just
ADU first might be, helpful.
have the graphic up and,
Exactly.
or the document, excuse me.
May I just add? Since we last met, and even since town meeting, this HLC has been involved in and sponsoring webinar and workshops. So I've attended two related to ADUs since then, and I think what the changes that we've made have made it consistent with the model bylaw and are more particularly aligned with what we think can be done and what's been clear. But I will say that the state has said a lot of good questions are still coming in, and they're likely to be issuing some further clarifications and maybe even some revisions. And so I don't think this will likely be the end, but this is a really good starting point, and it's consistent with what the state has issued.
Thank you.
And not that it's related directly to this, but what we've learned from that is there may be things in our regular zoning that already exist. In some cases, setbacks that are different for a primary dwelling versus an accessory dwelling, that maybe we may come back to you with some minor amendments to make everything consistent, to make it the best projects possible for the residents of Milton. So there may be some things in June, very small, minor things, so that we can get that consistency. But those would not be, it was too late to try to do that for May town meeting.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions?
I just had a few edits that I think Kathleen missed.
Okay.
Because she had a lot. She went through them as
Yeah,
I
there
was
were a few.
watching the meeting, right?
Yep. And did you get the latest draft? Because there were some things that,
So we got a new version of the site plan.
okay.
This is the ADU.
I didn't make changes to the.
Okay, the ADU would be the same then, so if there's,
Right. So this we got it on
With a group of four,
Yeah.
and then you got a second one of the other one.
of the site plan.
By itself.
Correct.
Yeah.
So Meredith, the one that they have is the one that Kathleen made a minor revision since our meeting, so that's what they received. No, that's what
Oh,
you have.
that's what I have,
yes.
all right.
yeah, so, yeah. We want to make sure that we all have the same,
So,
It should-
Oh,
is what you
Laura's
have.
got that.
this is just minor, but
Mhm.
in the purpose, right at the top, Karen. I think, and I could be wrong, the last sentence in the first paragraph, this zoning provides 4 by right ADUs. FOR?
that should be correct, yes.
Correct.
And then page 2, it's the definition of ADU. It might, under A, where it talks about maintains a separate entrance, blah, 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 sufficient to meet the requirements of the building and fire codes. You might want that plural.
I think so.
Yep, that's.
Did you also want to include egress? Like you have egress, do you want ingress too? So you have both? And enter and exit? Because you have egress, so you have that covered, but do you also want ingress
I think that makes sense.
to have, so, because you can get in and out?
Yes, ingress.
Okay. Sorry, Lori, I didn't mean to jump in.
No, that's, jump in. Let's do it in order. If anybody else has anything that I missed. So under 5, this is just a question. Gross floor area talks about multiple principal dwellings. Are we talking about like a multifamily?
Yeah, so this is something where they consider if it's a rental, let's say it's a 2 or 3 unit rental.
Yeah.
If they consider the entire building the principal dwelling.
Okay,
So you're still allowed 1 ADU on that lot.
okay,
So it's by the lot, you're allowed 1 ADU, not by how many units are in the structure on the lot.
okay, got it.
That was something that was clarified at both of those sessions I took.
Okay. And then,
They're still working on, though, a condominium, because if you have 3 condominiums, is it the condominium association that applies for the ADU? Is it one owner that applies? So I think they still have questions. The state is still working on that. But on the rental, it's pretty clear.
but if it was a condominium, 3 condos,
Still only 1.
still only 1. It's just a matter of who applies. Interesting. Oh, that's nice.
Right? Very interesting, right?
Oh, that should not be allowed for now.
All right.
However, if 3 people apply, our bylaw only allows for 1, and then anything greater than 1, you need a special permit.
Oh,
So there's a protected ADU is what this covers,
correct.
and only 1 protected ADU is allowed per lot.
Okay.
So the state does allow for sort of unprotected, or they call them local ADUs by special permit, but this bylaw does not.
But however, it goes to the ZBA for a variance, so they would have, for a special permit.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I'm on 13. You have something before 13?
Yes. 13, which letter are you under?
Oh, same one I was just in.
You're fine, keep going.
I was in whatever.
You want to be?
Definitions?
Are you still in subsection 4? Is that what you're talking about, 13?
No, yeah, go ahead.
13 of definitions.
Keep going.
Family residential zoning district.
Yeah, so you've used single-family residential dwellings previously, and the F is capitalized. I don't know if you
I
want
think that's right.
Yes, I think that is
I think
correct.
you're right.
And so I got a little hung up on the transit station definitions. Are they,
That's right from the state.
that's from there?
Yeah, we did make the change because we wanted everything to be consistent with the state.
With their model bylaw?
With the, yes.
Even though that might be different than some of their other definitions.
They've changed their definition. That's what we ran into. That was another thing that we kept, taking it directly from their definitions. And then we look at it and they've changed it. So it's been sort of a moving target. But, so we're taking it from their most updated.
Okay. And then at the end of A, transit authority, I think you need a period, similar to the others.
Correct. You're right.
Yes, thank you.
Liz, jump in if I go past.
I'm at C8 is where I'm coming in, so
Oh, all right.
you're fine.
C1 then.
Yep.
No, I guess I'm okay. Building code and fire code, you reference them separately.
Fire codes, we should make that consistent.
Well, if you do building and fire codes, I think that's how we did it before.
I think you did building and fire codes plural.
Plural.
And then you want to add ingress in there too, if you're going to remain consistent. So safe ingress and egress under the building and fire codes.
Well,
Or is that how you had it earlier?
it's interesting, building code and fire code here are separate versus building and fire codes.
Okay.
So in this case, well, you could do it because there could be more than one applicable fire code, I suppose. There's one building code.
I think 8 is okay, Liz.
I'm okay with it generally, but I think that's a little bit confusing, the first sentence and the second sentence. So
Where are you, Liz?
the first part of the first sentence, C8.
C8, subsection C, subsection 8. An ADU may not, is that where you are?
Yep, be rented for periods. There's a period after the period. Less than 12 months at a time. Okay, I'm fine with that. But then, and is prohibited from being rented on a weekly or daily basis. That's a little bit confusing because it's the same thing twice, but also it's like, on the one hand, it says it can't be rented for fewer than 12 months. Okay, period, the end. That incorporates that it cannot be rented for a weekly or daily basis. Then people come in and they're like, well, 6 months is not prohibited by the second part of the sentence, but it is prohibited by the first part of the sentence. So I think that is very hard to listen to myself repeating myself over there. But I think that you're better off just getting rid of that second part or only including the second part, but not having both.
Are you envisioning a sublet situation? So if somebody's renting an ADU for 12 months, and then that person decides to take off and see the world for maybe 2 weeks, and then that person sublets or rents it out or gives it to a family member or friend, is that what you're envisioning with that second
Right,
sentence?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
We're just,
But either way, it can't be rented for fewer than 12 months.
But the
Period of less than.
you're not prohibited from subleasing, right?
Yeah.
By law-
And it should say
by law
prohibited from
otherwise.
being subleased.
The sublease would have to be 12 months, according to this language. I don't know, and it could be the vacationer.
Yeah, that's what I'm
It
thinking.
could also be someone moves,
Yeah.
and they're gone for 6 months or 10 months, and they still have to pay the rest of the 12 months. Or they can go through whatever and deal with the landlord. But it just is, it doesn't envision a different set of rules for subleasing. It just says 12 months.
I just think that second part of the sentence is a little bit redundant and would kind of confuse me because it says 12 months. So the second part is already prohibited from being rented on a weekly or daily basis. It's already prohibited by the first part, which is that you can't rent it for fewer than 12 months.
I think that I mean, sorry to jump in, Liz, but perhaps this section is envisioning the long-term rental, which is 12 months, but then prohibiting the 12-month renter from then using it.
as an Airbnb.
Right, so, and if that's the intent, then perhaps it should be stated explicitly.
Yeah, I think it has
in
to
this
be
section.
clarified.
Right, it should be clarified, because that's what when I read it, that's how I figured, okay, so we have a 12-month renter, this person goes away, or, I don't know, it could be a student traveling abroad, studying abroad, and rents it out, subleases it. So I envision a sublease situation, or maybe even going away and renting it out and making some money, I don't know. So I just feel like that needs to be clarified if that's the intent that's behind the weekly, daily basis language.
I think we should get town council's opinion on that, because we are concerned about this. This is a reality that things are being rented on weekly and daily basis. And, you know, the building department, as much as, you know, and the enforcement officers and in the town, this is a lot to put on them, and so we do want to have proper language. The other thing is, right now, HLC is allowing for municipalities to determine what their length of rental would be. If that were to change, we would have to go back. It may be that we would change, the 12-month period at some point if that changes, but we're sort of building in this language so that if any other language had to be changed, we have this in there. But I think we should maybe just get town council's opinion on that.
I think you can say, and even if you added like a comma at a time, comma, and under no circumstances may be rented on a shorter base, rented, subleased, leased on a shorter basis, including weekly or daily basis. Because I take your point, Meredith, like if the HLC were to come back and say a short 12 months is too long, which I don't know that they will, but if they did.
So far, they
You
haven't.
want to, right, they haven't done that, but someday, if that were to happen, who knows? You want to still have that language that says if they were to strike that out, you still can't rent it for weekly or
Correct.
daily basis.
Correct. Because then we'd have to come back to town meeting, and it might be the timing of coming back to town meeting. We at least would have that language in there.
Well, do you need to add monthly, weekly, or daily? Well,
Yeah, if you also don't want it monthly, sure.
Somebody rents.
And maybe we take the language, some of the language that's in the model bylaw. They address the short-term rental in the model bylaw.
You can just take it away after 12 months at a time period. The subleases are not allowed, or whatever else you envision.
Yeah, you could say subleases are not authorized under this bylaw. Anything less than 12 months.
So I don't know, so if we want to use some of their language.
Let's get I'm always just
Yeah.
thinking, because this would be fine, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Are you looking at the definition?
under definitions, 13.
It's not getting to the time, though. Right, it's
Yes,
talking about at least one room or unit is
Yeah.
rented to an occupant or
but
sub-occupant.
it's, but using just the same language, at least
Gotcha.
sublease, suboccupant.
But if you were to look, Maggie, at the, like in the do's and don'ts, pages before the model bylaw on the MassGov website that I think you're looking at, if you were to look, why they're not numbered, I don't know, but C regulations, 1, then little b, short-term rentals, it talks about, to Meredith's point, it talks about how, you can sort of think about situations in which it would make sense to have short-term rentals, but you can limit it sort of in this way. So I think it's probably fine, but I would just talk to town council about how to make it a little bit clearer for people that that's kind of what you're trying to do.
Because otherwise it'll be misinterpreted, and then someone say, well, that's not what you said in your bylaws, and you can do X, Y, and Z.
We have 2 people online. Judy?
Thank you. I just wanted to go to this rental language, if I could. In some other towns that already had ADUs before this all-state law came into effect, language that I thought was pretty clear, that was used was ADUs may not be rented less than 31 days. And then they sort of left it up to the landlord to determine what kind of lease terms would benefit their situation of being a landlord and having a tenant. Less than 31 days covers the vacation rental situation rather well. Also, saying that you can rent for no less than 12 months, there could be a landlord-tenant situation where month-to-month lease is preferable for the business sense of being a landlord. So if you put an exact length of, even though a 12-month, 1-year lease is the highest percentage of leases that are drawn up for tenants, it kind of gives a little bit of flexibility. It could very well be that landlords go away in February and March and don't want to leave their whole property for a tenant to use. So they do, a shorter, I don't know, shorter span of time. Or it could be that they have family that comes in consistently every year during the holidays, and they want that space for use for that. But I saw the no less than 31 days in a few, including my new favorite town, New Marlboro. Out there in the Berkshires, they had ADUs in their town prior to this all-state situation of having ADUs. And that's how they determined to make a clear case. Someone coming in for a week hiking through the Berkshires was not the situation they were looking for in that town. Just a thought, and then you don't have to have so many sentences and scenarios to explain what you're trying to do. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Judy. We have one more question. New Marlboro was certainly ahead of their time, weren't they? Jay Funling.
Model town.
No, thank you. My point was addressed earlier.
Sorry, Jay. Thank you. Oh, right.
We actually debated this clause quite extensively a couple weeks ago. Was it weeks or months? Who knows?
Who knows?
But I think the length of time, I think that's for the planning board and the committee to decide. I think there are arguments either way. Some folks may want more time to have more consistency with tenants, and some folks may say it could make sense to have it shorter. I don't think, I don't really take too strong a position, but I do feel like when this was before the town meeting a couple weeks ago, what I heard was some people don't feel like ADU should have added regulations compared to the regular homes. And I think this one, if I was just a citizen, this would jump out at me. I can rent my house for 3 days if I want to, or 6 months, or 3 years. But for some reason, this town thinks 12 months is the right amount of time to limit ADUs. I think that's just something that would strike me as odd. I get that we're allowed to regulate ADUs because of, the Dover.
Under the Dover.
Yeah, so I get that we can, but what I heard from some town meeting members was a feeling, why should they be limited in what they can do with ADUs, or why should citizens be limited?
So sort of our position was that, especially in single-family neighborhoods, that most residents buy into a single-family neighborhood with the assumption it's going to remain a single-family neighborhood. So when you buy in, sort of like your contract with your neighborhood, it's single-family, that's your expectation. So because it's so new, like in my opinion, I feel like we should keep it at 12 months. Let your single-family neighbors become okay with it and see what pops up, see how many come through. It's sort of just a safety mechanism. Personally, as I mentioned at our meeting, I have 2 neighbors who have temporary apartments, and it works fine in our neighborhood. because we know the owner of the house. They have family members that come in for a shorter amount of times. And if we have a problem with the situation, we know who to address the problem with. This, as of right, there's no owner occupancy requirement. So there could be a higher turnover, and there may not be somebody on site to voice your concerns with.
So I would think a regular primary residence would still have that issue, right? Because as a homeowner, I can just leave and I can say, I'm gonna have a new family come in every month. And that's how it is because I own this house and I've liberty to treat my property as long as I'm not breaking any laws. So I would think, I think there could still be questions at town meeting on that same thread of why would we limit what people can do with ADUs when we're trying to open housing and invite more people to come into this community?
So I think that is a very good question, and that's what distinguishes an ADU, is that it's under the Dover Amendment, where a single-family home is not under a Dover Amendment. So they're different. It's a different classification, although they're saying you can't treat it differently. They have made certain. There are certain things that we can ask that. And one of them is the length of, according to the state, they've said you can determine the length of the rental period. There's things that we can't, such as owner occupancy. We can't require that. So and that's why we've been listening to these different discussions on what we can and cannot do. It's always something we can come back in the future, but I think with being so new, I think the planning board felt let's start at this point, and then we can always address it and shorten it later. But it's harder to do the opposite, so.
I think you make an interesting point, though, because the state has said throughout their regulations, the way to think about it is, if you don't regulate your single families on this matter, then think hard about whether you're going to regulate the ADU on the matter. So whether that's for site plan approval, whether it's for other things, because their intent is not to have the ADU more highly regulated than the single family is. So the single families are not highly regulated, to your point. There's actually very little that controls even the size of them, as one of the things that we've talked about. The setbacks and the height are the primary determinants, but you probably have seen very large houses on small lots because we don't have a floor area ratio restriction, so you can build quite a large house. And we have some lot coverage, but then it's single families are exempt from it. And so these are the things that Meredith was referring to earlier. So we can't make a restriction on those that doesn't exist in the single family, but we've already talked about maybe we should look at those for the single families too. So we may come back in June, if there's a June town meeting, with a couple of thoughts about that. But I think your question is something that town meeting's probably going to have some discussion about.
Thank you. I have Allison and Brian. Lori, Liz, Macy.
Thank you for the information. I do, I guess this is up for discussion, but many will have different viewpoints. But I think, living in a neighborhood, I would appreciate more of a tighter versus looser kind of mentality, especially given with the traffic, the amount of concerns that we are now facing amongst of that type of, adding more units, adding more housing, adds more of a safety concern. And as a parent with young kids who are constantly out in the community on bikes, everything, I'd rather take more caution and less turnover than higher turnover. An owner occupied does, to me, make more of a sense to Maggie's point, because then there's somebody on site, I'd prefer the person has the property that's there is going to be more concerned with what's going on. So I don't, necessarily agree with people being able to do that with their single family houses either. But, we are, we could always step it back versus it's going to be harder to put it back in there if we do that. So I can appreciate the discussion. I understand that town meetings, a reflection of someone of the town, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily the whole town that necessarily agrees with it, because there are people that don't get on the town meeting. So I think we need to always take overall a viewpoint of not just what town meeting thinks too. I do want to make sure that we think of the whole community and not always speak on just town meeting members. Thanks.
Thanks, Allison.
Can
Brian?
I just point?
Oh, I'm sorry.
out
Yeah,
one thing
absolutely.
out? The state does not allow us to restrict occupancy to an owner. Just want to be clear about that. It's prohibited.
Thank you.
I'm not, I was just said that it would, to Maggie's point about it, the ADUs is owner, there's an owner occupied from what I understood.
It's not
A
allowed.
temporary apartment, but
That's our current temporary apartment
Right.
bylaw has that provision, but it's not allowed to be in the ADU. And just so everyone understands, someone could apply for an ADU today because the law went into effect February 13th. And none of these provisions would apply to it. It would only be the state regulations that apply to it. And those are no owner occupancy requirements.
I know, and that's kind of why it's a shame that town meeting didn't pass it when they did, because it is up for, you can apply for a permit. My brother keeps texting me, should we apply for an ADU permit? So anybody can apply for one now. And it is a shame that town meeting didn't pass it back then. So that's why we really would like it to pass now. Our position as planning board members are to protect the neighbor. And doesn't necessarily reflect what I would like to do with my property. It's protecting the neighbor. And so, we can't do certain things, and we are bolstering density in our town and in our neighborhoods. But unfortunately, we are not bolstering our emergency services. Milton Hospital is over capacity. Our firemen are short-staffed, 6 firemen every shift. Our police are short-staffed. So it's going to be challenging to, Allison said about the safety on the streets. And that's why I think a more cautious approach is better at this point in time.
One thing I'll point out too is it's been pointed out that being a landlord is something that not everyone's familiar with the law around being a landlord. So whether everyone's going to want to jump in and spend $300,000 to build an ADU and then become a landlord and find that there's a lot of protections for tenants, I personally, and I think the state is seeing that it's going to be a gradual increase. It's not going to be, that every town's going to be overrun with them, especially in a town like Milton with such a high owner occupancy situation. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. Brian?
Yeah, hi, just to chat. Yeah, I agree with Allison, and I think that's actually one of the central flaws with the law, is that you don't have to be owner occupied. And there's a lawsuit going on now in California where neighbors are upset because developers have bought up land and they're putting up like 12 units and using the ADUs as extra units, where developers come in, will buy the property, and they get a higher value for it because they can pop an ADU on it. And there's really no control. And I would feel a lot differently about this if it did have a requirement of owner occupied, but it doesn't. So I think that's a flaw. And I think that, you know, I'd rather make it tighter and safer and not change the, you know, have the neighborhoods have some control over it.
So the building official, if the building official got an application for an ADU, they can't ask the applicant to show that the owner's going to occupy it. They're
Oh,
not
I
allowed
get
to do
that.
it.
I think that's a problem, but I think that's why I'd rather have, you don't want a developer coming in and then just renting out things on a short-term basis, buying up the neighborhood and making it like more economical for them to do something like that. I think you want to maintain people living in a neighborhood, because all of a sudden there's a higher value to these pieces of property because you can build an ADU. So I think you want to keep it so that people are, have to stay there for 12 months, have the kids in the school, et cetera. You don't want it, so you want it as least transient as possible, I think. My opinion.
Thank you, Brian. Lori?
Do we allow Airbnbs in Milton, or is there a bylaw to prevent them or prohibit them?
We do not. They've always been no, not that they are not allowed, but I just say they do exist. But they're not regulated.
But there's a bylaw.
And they're not allowed. There's no provision to allow them.
But there's no enforcement.
There's no enforcement.
So I believe back in the day, there was a problem with Curry College kids renting, like, houses, and so predated me, so I don't know the particulars, but.
But it does go back to, enforcement and what our building department, you know, how much can they handle and how much can the enforcement officers handle?
So it's like jaywalking?
Like loading zones in East Milton.
Double parking.
They're not allowed, but they do exist.
I think in application, if there's, you know, a complaint filed with the building department, they go and inspect the property, and then they can take action. But they don't have capacity to go around to nearly 10,000 properties and see what's happening. But it's my understanding, and there was one situation in which this particular property had come to the planning board for to be subdivided, and part of it was an agreement had been reached between neighbors that there wouldn't be opposition to the subdivision if they stopped using it as an Airbnb. And that was not a planning board decision. Ours was just on the merits of whether you could subdivide it, but a separate agreement had come in amongst the neighbors for that. So that's something where, you know, it was, neighbors had taken that, you know, into their, what they could do about it. But otherwise, it's the building officials. And you probably know we have a vacancy in the building commissioner position, so they are inundated with applications, and so enforcement is probably going to be difficult for the foreseeable future until that position's filled.
And we do have quite a bit of development going on, as you all know, which is in some ways great for the commercial base, but it also puts a burden on our departments that need to be supported and funded. One of the things too, just with the timing is, and what the state and HLC has said is, we want the towns to do what's best for those towns. So in many cases, some towns will say that they do want weekly and daily rentals, and a town would be allowed to do that. In Milton, we could do that if we wanted. We could say, we could allow Airbnbs and do that. And there will be probably some towns who they think that that's the best thing for their town, and that's what they'll pass. So we've been allowed flexibility on what what we feel is the right fit for Milton. So, and the planning board has come back to this 12-month as a place to start. Let's begin here. And
it is interesting, because then there are other cities and towns who want to be more restrictive. So I just recently watched the City of Revere City Council, and they want to seek an exemption to the state, because they think that the ADU law will be overly burdensome to them, and they had 4 particular issues. So they, in their opinion, they think that it could be an unfunded mandate, this ADU, and they want to seek an exemption. So they are asking their town council and their planner to reach out to the state. So because it is so new, all the towns and cities are struggling with it. And again, in my opinion, I think change is important and it's inevitable, but sometimes it should be done with baby steps and caution for us to figure out how it works for us.
Liz, and then Macy.
Thanks. So, just to agree with Allison again, I think that we really have to consider sort of the whole town. And so, we're certain people, you're certain people, town meeting certain people, but I'm curious if you've had input from other people other than sort of outside of just town meeting. I don't know if you've had like public forums or, invited feedback on not just this particular issue of the short-term rental, but this bylaw and then the site plan bylaw, which I don't think that there has to be a public forum in every situation. But, I know we're going to get to the East Milton zoning, and I live in East Milton, so I've gone to a lot of them, and I think that that's been very well attended and appreciated. So I don't know if that's something that you've had an opportunity to do or would be willing to consider, because I think that having, to Allison's point, the whole town having an opportunity to sort of weigh in would be beneficial, so that because, I get it that we can do this, but it would be nice at town meeting to explain to people, not just my opinion as a mother of like 2 small children also, and Allison, our opinions, which are valid and important, I think, but also kind of we've heard from, we made it available to everyone in the town, and whoever showed up, and they gave us our thoughts and, kind of implementing it in that way. So I don't know if that's something that you've considered. And then I also just wanted to say, like, I really take your point, Maggie, about, that we have sort of some of these challenges in town with the fire department and the DPW and the police and the building commission. And when you said about the loading zones in East Milton Square, that really touches my heart. But so definitely don't want to overburden already burdened departments. But I do think, sort of to Ron's point, I don't think it's my role as a member in the Warrant Committee to decide what the planning board should or shouldn't do. I think that you're, set with doing that, and town meeting can weigh in, but town meeting is going to weigh in. And there are some people I'm interested in, have we had an opportunity to sort of be transparent and have the whole town kind of have an opportunity to weigh in as well?
So that's a great, I think that's a great question. So we advertise, we're required to post 2 weeks in advance of every public hearing. We have had ongoing public comment periods on these articles. So that is the typical vehicle for coming. We don't do a public forum for every item, every article that comes before us. We'd be doing public forums weekly. But we post it, it's required legally, and we actually extended this even well beyond, because there was a break in our public hearing process. So up until the week before, we had an opportunity for a public, there was a public hearing, and it was outreach on that, so that's great.
So on this article is a little different than some others that we initiated on our own, like site plan approval, where the ADU, is a state law, and we knew that the time frame for it going into effect was very short, and we felt that it would be good to put some processes in place that the state allows for us to put in place. Otherwise, it's left to the building commissioner and the building department to review these applications on their own without any other guidance than what's in the regulations. And so this doesn't give us as much time. Like, we've been working on East Milton overlay zoning for a very, very long time because it is a significant change, and we followed a pattern that the process that we did when we did an overlay in Milton Village, and that took 3 years, and I think East Milton's taken 3 years. But on the ADU, if we don't do anything quickly, then the processes are already in place that the state put in place. So that's why our time frame is a little different on this. And site plan approval is really something we initiate because it's, we feel as if would aid the board, the applicants, and the residents. So it's not something that most people, unless they have a project that comes under our review, comes in next to them, they're even aware of. But when they find a project that comes next to them, they're very concerned about it, and they want to know what the process is. And there's always questions about what our jurisdiction is. And so we'll get to that. But I just want to make the distinction between how we're handling the ADU and how we've handled other zoning.
Yeah, so it is our legislators are to blame for this. And I'm okay with putting blame where it's due. And so they passed the law, then they put a date on it. And I'm not a huge fan of HLC these days. However, HLC moved as fast as they could. And so that's why everything is delayed. So we're reacting to what is given to us. And I think it's a bit unfair. And we know who our legislators are, so please contact them. And planning takes time to get it right, because once you put something up, it's there forever. And it's kind of a shame that how this process has unrolled. And we have had a lot of feedback, because if you look back 3 years ago, the town did put forward an ADU bylaw to town meeting. And
It didn't get considered.
It didn't, yeah, it failed, and then the town.
Didn't get considered.
Yeah,
It was
and-
sent back for
Yeah, and we also put, I wasn't involved in it, but also a revision to our temporary apartment bylaw was put forward that would make it less restrictive, and that was not approved either. So we're kind of,
sent back for further study.
yeah, so we've inherited a couple of these things, and there have been years of discussion, so even though I wasn't on the planning board at that time, I was part of the discussion, so.
This is a very positive thing that this is going
Yes,
forward.
Yes, so people want ADUs, people are supportive of it. We know there's a need for it. You know, again, my kids are 22, 24, my daughter's a teacher, so I understand the need. I had a special needs sister. My niece has Down syndrome, so I think my family hits every category in need of an ADU. But also, from, as I said earlier, our perspective is to protect the neighbors. And a lot of neighbors don't know what's going on until literally a construction company shows up next door.
A couple more comments. We have Macy
I have a
and
follow-up.
Steve. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I could wait.
No, why don't you go
To
ahead?
you. Real quick follow-up. Have you had feedback about the rental term specifically for the ADU?
I would say, we've had some. Sorry. And it's been both for and a shorter, advocating for shorter. So we have heard both. Thank you.
Macy?
I have a question about the definition of an ADU. What comes to mind is a particular construction site right next to Fontbonne. So it's a massive house. I drive by it every day, and there's a garage, what appears to be a very fancy garage that looks like there's a dwelling. Does that count as an ADU? Even though it's a garage, it looks like it's going to house cars, but it looks like there's a dwelling
Like
in
a
it.
cottage house?
So they would have to go to the building department.
Okay.
They would have to, and that's where this is, everything that we're doing is so important. They would have to go through, they would have to have the architectural plans, that they would show that it would be no larger than 900 square feet.
Okay.
It would have to have the bathroom, it would have to have all of the different,
Dwellings, yeah.
all of the different needs, and it would have to be clearly distinct, and it would have to follow basically the standards that we have put in there, so.
So let's say that that was permitted before this went into effect, obviously, because it's been under construction for a while.
Right.
So it wouldn't, at that time, have been an ADU unless they went through the special permit process to be a temporary apartment. But if that's what they did, a temporary apartment could be considered a protected ADU if it meets the requirements.
Okay.
So, but let's say they got that approved for 950 square feet, it's not a protected ADU, and then it would still exist under whatever it was permitted by, that process it was permitted by at that point, whether it was a variance or some other special permit process. But existing temporary apartments can be considered protected ADUs automatically if they meet all of these the definition that's in the reg.
Okay. But that could potentially be an ADU. So if that was a new construction happening today, that structure that looks like a garage but looks like there's a dwelling attached to it or above it could be an ADU.
So let's say they got that permitted as living space as a family room.
Right.
And they now wanted to make an ADU. As long as that met the requirements, they could, go back to the building department and amend their permit application to add the kitchen, which is probably what triggered it.
Right.
Trigger they probably have a bathroom already there.
Okay. It's just my concern is that here we have that huge structure, right? And it predates the bylaws that we're looking at now. And the neighbors are under, Fontbonne's the neighbor, but their neighbors next to it are under the impression it's a single-family dwelling, and it's, garage, could be a family room, could be a guest house, whatever, but then all of a sudden it can be rental property.
Yes.
Because it looks like it could potentially be very nice rental property.
So one of the things that we've been understanding and these workshops have helped clarify is the ADU only has to meet the lesser restrictive requirement of either the primary dwelling or an accessory structure. So an accessory structure in our zoning bylaw is allowed to be closer to the property line than a primary dwelling. So
A garage.
even
That's
in a
a
garage,
garage.
yeah, and even in addition to a primary dwelling, the addition can meet the setback requirements for the accessory, while the house itself is having to meet the other setbacks. And that's why we said we wanted to go back and look at that. Height, too. Like right now, our accessory dwellings are 21 feet max, but accessory structures, But an accessory dwelling can be the least restrictive, so it could be the primary dwelling of 35 feet. So that's kind of the.
That garage
With the
meets
minimum
that.
setback
Yeah.
of maybe it's only 8 feet is the setback requirement, and now it can be the size of a house. So you can have the height of the main house right on a property line because it had once been a garage footprint, so.
So, yeah, these pre-existing structures are another thing that the state's been hearing a lot about. And they did indicate that they're still looking at it. So there might be some further clarification about how to view those.
Thank you.
Yeah, good.
Okay, Steve Rhines.
Hey, thanks, Mr. Chair. Just a comment. Thanks for the continued work on the ADU bylaw. It's important. I didn't realize it went into effect on you said February 13th. So it's good we get ahead of that and keep modifying that. Just want to table a concern that I'm hearing. Understaffed first responders, and we continue to add to the stock. And I keep hearing that we have this huge shortage of housing. But, one of the things I think we need to also keep working with these other departments that they're staffing up to support that, right? There's huge units going in all over the place. And with this more, they're already stretched thin, right? So I just want to make sure that we keep that in the front of our mind. It's a big issue. And every time we hear groups present, what we're hearing is there's nobody to enforce any of these guidelines. This seems kind of challenging to me, right? We're going to be talking about East Milton in a minute, and everything there. We'll get to that when we get there. But with the inability to to manage this stuff, why do we keep adding this stuff? It has to be a question. I mean, are you thinking about how we can add more folks to enforce what's being put out into the community? Thank you.
Well, unfortunately, that's not in our lane to do. I wish we could, but, it's not even just adding personnel, it's adding appropriate equipment too. Because I think possibly our fire equipment has been undersized. Maybe their new one is going to be able to be a little bit bigger. But it is a concern. You know, one of the first snowstorms we had, we lost a police cruiser in an accident. So there's always things going on, and I think it's a real challenge. And I don't have an answer. Sorry, Steve.
That's okay, Maggie. I appreciate it. Thank you.
The only thing I would say is that by adding this level of process, it does give another look at it by the planning board. You know, some people may prefer that it go directly to the building department, but the building department is, as we said, you know, they're going to look for just strict compliance with what the regulations and the zoning require, where the planning board can have a public meeting and take comment from the neighbors, where that is not an opportunity if it just goes through without this bylaw, because as we've said, it's already the law, it's state law. Over amendment means it's a protected use, you can't say no to it, you can only guide it. And so how that gets guided is through the planning board. It doesn't get guided at the building department. The building department can say yes or no, it meets the requirements, but they can't say, well, you shift it over here a little bit, or well, you shift it over there a little bit because, or can you provide this screening because you got this condition on this particular piece of property. So it doesn't get necessarily to some of the concerns about departments or infrastructure, but it does get to what Maggie was talking about was, you know, each property has neighbors, and giving neighbors an opportunity to hear about it. I will say, though, that this does not apply to an ADU that is within an existing structure. It doesn't need an addition, and it's not a new structure. So if you have a home and you want to put in the attic or somewhere else, you don't have to go through this process for that. You go straight to the building department.
That's a good point, yeah.
Thank you.
Which that in itself can be another problem. You know, it takes away a review. So from a public safety, public health perspective, you know, there's no review of a bedroom size requirement.
That's in the building code.
It's in the code, yeah. So it just, you know, we got sort of rid of, you know, basic boarding house years ago because of the safety concerns. So there's safety, you know, there's safety concerns.
Well, these will have to meet the building code and the health codes for bedroom size, for ventilation, for sunlight, all of those things, ceiling heights, et cetera.
With just nobody to enforce it, though.
Correct.
Well, you can't,
Yeah.
you have to have a certificate of
occupancy.
occupancy, you have to have a building permit, you have to, just as if you did any construction on your own home, that all applies here.
Yeah, but to Steve's point, if you do a single, a one-bedroom, you get your certificate of occupancy, you know, a year later, you put up a wall, and now all of a sudden it's 2 bedrooms.
Yep.
It's no different on any kind of structure for that kind of.
Okay. Okay, does anybody of the committee have any just questions regarding the previous section that we've just been discussing? Left in the ADU bylaw, we have design standards, process, and authority of the planning board. We just touched on enforcement briefly. Does any member of the Warrant committee, well, actually, I'll defer to the planning board in terms of design standards, process, or authority. Is there anything that you'd like to point out to us?
Those are fairly similar. I think those are basically the same, maybe limited a little bit more in scope, but essentially the same. So.
As to those next 3 sections, it's the very end, excuse me, the very end of the bylaw. Does anybody have any questions?
I have, this isn't a question, but under E, process and procedural requirements, number 3, I think it needs to have a space, needs to have like a tab.
Under number 3?
E, 3, yeah, so see where it says 1.
One hard copy?
It's 1 over 2. See how it's, see that?
Oh, it's just the formatting.
It's a format
Yeah.
thing. We'll get to it later.
Yeah.
And then the enforcement section. Should certificate of occupancy be capitalized, since it's an official?
Is that a definition too?
No, just until number 3, Karen and admin and enforcement. There wasn't a definition, but it just is, I always think of a C of O as capitalized. I didn't know. I defer.
Not sure. I always think of the capitalized items as being those that are found in the definitions, but you attorneys here.
I believe it is
may have another
capitalized,
idea.
actually.
It should be, because
I
building
believe-
permit, it's
That's
capitalized.
what I believe it is,
So it's
certificate
consistent.
of is not necessarily, but
No.
of certificate and occupancy are, yeah.
Yeah, it's a proper noun, yeah.
Yep, it is, and that's the way it's usually read. I will just point out, because I think this is, if you go right, just above 3, this is something I think to point out, is that we've tightened up and given a time frame on which we need to rule, because we wanted to ensure that applicants didn't feel like this could be dragged out, this could be somehow preventing an ADU by dragging out the process. So there's a clear under number 2, the planning board shall consider the site plan approval submission at a meeting held no less than 30 days after receipt of the complete submission, and we shall issue the decision and the written decision to the applicant and the building commissioner no more than 75 days after a site plan approval submission. Failure to issue a written decision within 75-day period or longer time may be time as agreed with the applicant will be deemed as approval of the site plan as submitted. So this just ensures that this is going to be quickly reviewed and that there's not going to be a longer
Basically,
term.
question, just as to that point, Meredith.
Is there an appeal process for that, if there's a denial? Or
again-
no? Or is it final after 75 days? I mean, I'm just curious, is there?
If we did nothing, it's automatically approved.
Okay.
But if there's a denial, we really can't deny, it goes back to saying it's something that,
But if it doesn't, the building commissioner can deny if it doesn't meet requirements.
Right, if there's
like
certain
setbacks
requirements.
and other things, right?
they would have to come back with a new submission.
Okay, so there's no appeals?
So
it's
that
just
would
an-
start the clock again with a new submission.
Good question.
Yeah, I was just curious, like, where would it go?
Sounds like a lot
after
of
that?
work for you guys.
In short order.
Hopefully, but
Right, so that's, originally it was a longer period
longer
of
term.
time, which I sort of was an advocate of, only because if you look, right now, we don't have a planning director. And I know it's a moment in time, but it puts more pressure on town staff. But we heard that it was too long. It's as of right, people, we took input in, and so that was something, we were willing to change. But it is a lot on town staff.
So yes, it would really be the building department that would deny if it was not the right square footage, if there were issues.
Okay.
Really through the building department would be the main. Main person tonight. That's it. But that was just, I just wanted to point out those timelines, so.
Okay. Any other questions? Just any member of the committee on those remaining sections? Everyone good on design standards? Everyone's good on that? I guess, just seeing no questions, is there any finishing comments you'd like to message to
No, I
us
think this
concerning
is-
the EDU?
I think it's, I'm grateful for all the input. I think it's made it, I think it is, there've been some improvements that have been made, which I think will make it, I know the people who we reached out to, who had comments on the town meeting floor, are in support of this article, and have stated that they're willing to express that at town meeting. So I think that there was a lot of work that's gone into this, and again, we now know what the language in the model bylaw is. We now have, we've had various different eyes to be on this and to try to make it more of what town meeting and the town of Milton will want to see.
And if there are any town meeting members watching, if they have any questions, concerns,
Yeah, please feel free to.
then please come to a planning board meeting prior to town meeting so we can walk it through and discuss. And let's not wait to the last minute. It's not always good to do zoning on the floor of town meeting.
So, Chair Hall, let me ask you, so I guess you're going to go back and you're going to look at the very short-term rental, the Airbnb.
Yeah, we're just going to make sure that we're not going to, we've gone over this a lot. The date won't be changed at this point, but the time frame, I should say. But I just want to check with town council to keep in, because we did feel, that we wanted to have all that language included, but maybe there's a way to write it that's.
Okay, and so when I ask that question, we would be voting on the ADU article as written right now.
As written, yes.
If perhaps you may come in with a
Correct.
suggestion prior to the town
Right,
meeting.
correct.
Okay, that's I just wanted to
And
square
that's
that
really
away.
the language that's been in there from the
Correct.
beginning, but happy to look at it further, so.
Is that 12-month period language? And then,
Yes,
Short-term
yeah,
rental.
exactly.
okay, great.
Yeah, it was C8, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. If we're all satisfied, we'll move on to the site plan.
Great.
If you want to.
Great. Do we want to pull that up also on the screen?
I'm going to pull that up too.
Sorry.
So in most of the changes, a lot of the changes that were made are just cleaning up language, making it, again, more concise. The most of the amendments that were made were approved prior to town meeting, and you all have already approved. It's coming back really because the town meeting members hadn't had a chance to look at those 8 proposed amendments that we approved. So those are in here. We've not changed anything. We've actually left the radon. If you remember, somebody from town meeting floor wanted to address the radon suggestion. We've kept that in. So all of those amendments have been kept in, and really, an overall,
I think one thing, Meredith, I'll point out, there had been a recommendation to say that the planning board could only condition and not reject any applications, but Kathleen O'Donnell, who is our new chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals, is one who would like to review zoning articles now as part of the process. And so she took a look at this also, as she did with the ADU, and she included some limited provisions under limited cases can a rejection be made. So if an application isn't complete, if, I have to go to it now.
and that's what we had in, if you remember, we had that in originally, and then we took it out to try to make it, more, but and that's because that's what we were trying to explain, that it would be under really limited conditions. We had removed that, and she actually recommended keeping that in.
So it was, yeah, so that the application is not complete. So this is under section L? No, M. Section M. The board may disapprove site plan only if the board finds, and there's 3. So that is a change from what you saw at town meeting, which we feel is a good change. And we thank Kathleen for putting that
Yeah,
together.
and she was great to really go through this. With some good suggestions. And really simplifying language and taking out some things that were duplicitous, that we've sort of reiterated in 2 different areas. We were able to
Another
streamline the
significant
language.
thing on her advice or counsel was to reduce the time frame in which we
Again,
must
typos.
issue a decision also. And she wisely tied it to, we can be longer if it's also in conjunction with a special permit, because those are a longer review process for us. For example, like the memory care facility on Highland. That was a many-month review process. But site plan approval on its own is pared back. So that's another change. So that was in O decision. And I think just before that. I just had made a couple of things that were in what you received later, where some were typos, but one was just to move a sentence to start another paragraph with it, and another was to make consistency on the 120 days.
Yeah, I just
So
got that. Yeah, I saw that. I'm like, this is 120/90.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you need, wasn't there an issue about a complete application?
I think we did.
Because in the decision, it still says, the board shall issue its written decision no more than 120 days after the receipt of a site plan review application. What if it's incomplete?
Yeah, we talked about that. I thought we did put a complete.
I thought we did
We
intend
did.
to put complete in
We
there.
did.
We did intend. Yeah.
Thought that was good.
Thank you for watching our meetings.
That should be in there under O we're talking about.
Yeah.
So we would add that language.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's also under CB.
Question about O.
If it's incomplete, then you notify the applicant what's missing as well. And then you can reject it if it's incomplete.
Question about O, down here by Macy.
So I have a question about the appeal process. It provides Chapter 48, Section 17. Is there a specific time period in which an applicant can appeal after a denial? Is it 30 days? Or do you know what it
Is
is?
it covered in that?
I'm going to look up 48 right now.
Thank you.
And
Because it says,
It might be
may appeal and send it to a
21,
court
10 or 21.
of a competent jurisdiction, but it doesn't provide the,
It would be the county court, wouldn't it?
yeah, and then 40, let me see what,
Superior?
yeah, I don't even know. Land court? 48, let me look up 48. Are you looking it up, Andrew?
Yep,
What does it say?
20 days.
Yeah, because I thought it
20
was
days.
if you get even
It's
if
20
you
days.
get a
Oh, and land court, too.
permit approved, they have 20 days, anyone has 20 days to appeal
20
it.
days. That land court.
Neighbor would have 20 days to appeal the decision of the planning board.
And are those calendar days and not business days?
Or business days.
Not need to say that?
We can add that language. I think that's.
I think you should, just for clarification, because a layperson would not know to look up general law, chapter 40. So I would add 20 days after a decision in either Superior Court or Land Court, which is weird, pursuant to general laws, chapters 48, section 17. But I would like the time period in there.
I would just double check on the days if it's business or calendar under the law before I put that in there.
It's usually business days for all appeals, yeah.
All of this will be reviewed by town council
Yeah.
before
I
Going
would.
back to town meeting, so.
So,
If you appeal like to appeals court, it's 20 days.
I'm not sure what I should be typing.
Business days.
So under O.
I'm a layperson.
Or Q appeal, correct? Q.
I'm a
Judy,
lay-
would that be helpful?
Q appeal.
Macy has suggested
Yeah,
language.
I would do, I mean, I would, like I said, it's, if you're appealing, it looks like it's an administrative review. And so typically with administrative reviews, based on my experience, it's business days. So if you're appealing something to the appeals court, it's 20 days, but it's not including weekends or holidays. So the rules of court will incorporate that. Either, in this case, it would be Superior Court or Land Court rules. So you would have to refer back. But I would put in 20 days in Superior Court or Land Court pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 17. And then the person can refer to that and see.
Oh, yeah.
And if they are filing in Superior Court, they would need to look at the Superior Court rules. Or Land Court, they would look at the rules. I know I'm getting into too much detail here. But
So are you suggesting that after the word appeal,
I would,
may appeal said decision within 20 days?
I would suggest that any person aggrieved by a decision of the board made under this section may appeal said decision. So I would take out to a court of competent jurisdiction because Section 17 provides very specific courts. So may appeal said decision within 20 days to the Superior Court or the Land Court.
Within 20 days of the decision being filed with the town clerk.
So the 20 days starts to run after the planning board files a decision with the town clerk. So that makes it even more specific. So
You could even state that.
yeah, I would state that because the 20 days starts to run not when you issue the decision, but when it's filed within
Yeah,
the town
upon-
clerk.
Upon issuance by the planning board and filing by the town clerk.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's specific language in a decision from Medfield. And it says, within 20 days of the decision being filed with the town clerk, you will need a certified copy of the decision from the town clerk in order to file the court appeal. Copy of the court appeal must also be submitted to the town clerk with copies sent to all board members.
That's above and beyond
Yeah.
what's required under.
This just tells it like, so nobody can say, well, the planning board denied it, but the clerk hasn't filed it. I mean, I have an extra day. I think, right? Is that what we're trying to do? Just
Yeah.
You
notify?
would.
But it's going to get into the weeds, into the statute. I mean,
filed-
all parties have to be notified. I mean, anybody.
Filed with the town clerk, not by the, yeah.
All the attorneys.
I think that's just cited in statute, but that's me.
I would cite that within 20 days after the decisions. Where was the chapter, section 17? Can you pull the statute up again? That's not the statute, that's Medfield.
It's to the,
48 section.
Yeah,
The
here it is, there it
Superior
is.
Court.
So, the statute says, the only person aggrieved by a decision for a local zoning board has standing, so that's a whole other issue, to bring a court appeal. Now, appeals may be filed in either Superior Court or Land Court within 20 days of the decision being filed with the town clerk. So I would put all that in there, because that's what's relevant.
All right, you need to be a little clearer so she can get that.
it's not a Superior Court, it's the Superior Court, but.
No, it's in either Superior Court or Land Court within 20 days of the decision being filed with the town clerk. So it could be any Superior Court. It would be Norfolk County here because we're in Norfolk County.
She's trying to edit it.
I know.
Yeah,
So-
someone here can tell me.
To the.
Oh, you're editing. Sorry. Okay.
So she needs you to be clear about what you want to put
I
where.
can't see. So I can't. My eyes are so.
It should be the Superior Court. Or a Superior.
It's just.
A Superior Court, because it could be any Superior Court.
It's so yeah. I would. Okay. So within.
It would have to be Norfolk County.
Filed with the town clerk. Okay.
But just tell me what's wrong. We could-
So I would say file with the town court in. I would take away A. Just write Superior Court. Or the Land Court, under general laws of
So
Mass.
Superior Court now capitalized?
No, you don't need to do that.
Or is Land Court capitalized?
There's only one.
Land Court, that's the thing.
Both are
You know what, I
capitalized,
would
right?
capitalize Superior Court,
Both
the
of them.
S and the C. So I didn't know you were making edits.
That's the way we typically, yeah.
Yeah, Superior Court. Okay, so within-
me to make this bigger?
Yes, please. Failing my eye test here. Okay, all right, so any person aggrieved by a decision of the board made under this section may appeal said decision within 20 days of the decision being filed with the town clerk to Superior Court or the land court under Massachusetts General Laws 40. Okay, I think that's good. So in the Superior Court.
Should be town clerk in Superior Court?
That's what I'm struggling with, yeah. It's to Superior Court. Appeal it
In either
to
the Superior
decision
Court-
to Superior Court.
Well, that's confusing because it looks like you're filing it to the Superior Court.
It's
You're-
in.
Yeah,
In either the Superior Court or the land court seeking to overturn the decision.
So it is in either.
Okay.
well, the town clerk is filing it
Yeah.
in the clerk. They don't file it to the Superior Court, you're filing the appeal to the Superior Court.
Yeah, so the decision, any person disagrees with the may.
The town clerk is
appeal
filing it in
said
the town clerk's
decision
office.
Within 20 days, okay, so you need to clarify, within 20 days,
After the
All- go ahead.
the zoning board's decision has been filed with the city or town clerk's office.
Are you reading it from the general laws or?
No, this is,
Yeah, let's go back to the statute. I think the statute has, we need to incorporate.
well, I didn't see
Hold on, let me pull it up, because it's on the mass.gov.
mass.gov statute. It's very verbose.
They all are. Okay, here it goes. I just pulled it up.
Here, right?
Okay.
Here.
Agreed by the section of the Board of Appeals or special permit granting authority.
You could probably also have town council review this.
Yeah, appeal to the land.
I don't know if we want to be doing this right now, but
Have town council incorporate the
Yeah.
language.
By bringing an action within 20 days
Okay,
after
okay.
the decision has been filed in the office of the city or town clerk.
Agreed by the decision, okay. Yeah, I agree. Have
If
town council
said
look at it.
appeal is made to said division of district court department, any party shall have the right to file a claim for trial of said appeal in Superior Court Department within 25 days after the service on the appeal is, okay.
Yeah, no, have them
Have counsel,
do it.
I would change it back.
Yeah, let's just go back.
Because
Have council do it.
the other problem is there's also a housing court piece too. If there's a housing court, I would just leave it, cite the statute, and just have them
I already have that
review.
down there for that.
Yeah, just have them look at it.
Yep.
I mean, the one reason why I like having the dates in there is because we also reference dates and timing in the previous paragraph or section. I mean, I like regulations that don't require necessarily an attorney to be involved in order to review it. So if it's a part of an appeals process, at least a light summary, I think is useful to the applicant, but doesn't.
The only,
Ron's got a question here, and then Liz.
I had a very general question. Section O talks about the decision-making process. And I was just wondering, is it customary for the board to have to do this work? Or would it be like the planning director for different towns? I assume you guys are volunteers, right? You're not paid to do this job. I just worry about the volume.
It would be our town planner who would write that, who would email that decision. It doesn't have to be, it's sometimes it's
Okay.
a real formal. It's, if the historical commission approves or denies something, it sends an email over. And that would come from the town planner. It would not,
Yeah,
our staff, I should say.
Yeah, the only reason, the language is very specific that talks about it must be by a majority vote of 3 members. I would just think if you want to have the town planner do this, I would just leave it more general. Like,
No, the town planner doesn't make the decision.
They don't make the decision,
But-
they just
yeah.
would deliver the,
but you still have to make the decision.
yes, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, I'm just seeing if you don't want to make that decision, you want to just let the town planner do it.
Some towns have what they call a minor and a major site plan approval, and some of those towns on the minor the town planner will be authorized to make the decision. We haven't made the distinction here between a minor and a major. There's not a lot of, some towns have a lot more different types of applications than Milton does. They have a lot of different zoning. They might have industrial, they might have more multifamily, more commercial, et cetera. We have some very small commercial districts. We have no industrial districts. We anticipate that at some point we'll have some type of MBTA community zoning under which that zoning would refer to this for the process for approval. But at the moment, the way we have it written, it does all of the projects that are subject to this, which is at the very beginning, would come to the planning board.
Oh, I applaud your public service. And I note that it's St. Patrick's Day today, and you already are demonstrating your willingness to give up your time for the town, so.
Well, you as well.
Oh, we had to.
Liz?
Emailed me specifically.
Yeah. Ron, you better be there tonight. Liz, did you have a comment or a question?
So for N and O, regarding the time limits, sort of similar to Ron, well, maybe not so similar to Ron's point, but it's very stringent that these things have to happen like between 30 and 45 days, and then the decision is 120 days. In the event of like an emergency, I don't know if there's any wiggle room that you want to or could build in, just like if there's another COVID, something happens, someone gets sick, you can't do it, whatever. There's a different pandemic, something. I don't know.
So one thing that we did with this is we put all of the potential submission requirements that we thought we might ask for in the submission requirements. So that idea of a complete application is important. And there's also this pre-application process. So that is intended to make it very clear that when we start the hearing, we have everything we need, that we've seen the pre-application, and that it's time to move it through. Maggie.
That's what slowed down things,
Yeah.
that we don't have all the materials.
I mean, Maggie has spoken about neighbors, but we also have applicants that we are responsible to. And applicants should be able to rely on a process that's fair and clear and consistent. Yeah. And so one thing I would say is that, who we get applications from, the applicants themselves, is influenced by these procedures and processes that we outline. So some applicants some developers don't look to Milton because they don't see, they see a process that they think might not be as clear as it could be, and they could be here for a long time. Mm-hmm. And so it's much better for all of us, the town, the residents, the board, staff, et cetera, to set up a clean, fair, consistent process.
So, and I talk about the neighbors because I'm on the planning board. But I have also been through this personally and professionally. And so depending on what hat I'm wearing, I have a different opinion. So because I'm on the planning board, I do think having some flexibility is helpful. And when I went through this process 10 years ago, we had an ice storm at Town Hall. We had a public hearing scheduled, and Town Hall was closed. And our hearing was scheduled for that night, and nobody was there to continue the public hearing. So then I had to start the public hearing all over again because it wasn't closed properly. So there are conditions that are special, and there should be some exceptions for it. And I do think having a time period for the applicant is really important. But this is also coming from the planning board, so I have a different hat, and I do think a little bit more time is helpful. My situation went on for 3 years, and that's so not helpful as an applicant, so I don't recommend that. But, you know, we don't know what the correct amount of time is. This is a moment in time, as we said, we don't have a planner. Our assistant planner and our clerk are doing a fabulous job. But they're under a lot of pressure right now. So in some cases, I do think some flexibility, and I think probably most applicants would be, I would hope, flexible.
They typically.
Yeah, I mean, in my,
yeah.
in my 10 years on the board, we've had extensions that the applicants have agreed to without problem. It's really to set an expectation here and to, again, we try and set up a process that if it works properly, we're able to do it within the 120 days, because we won't. I can also say that on the board, because we haven't been as explicit about what we would like in an application, it's deemed complete by the planning department, and yet we ask for more things. And so then it takes longer because we'd get them peer reviewed if it's stormwater design or traffic, things like that, and then you need time for the peer review. So it's much better to be clear in the beginning, so that once you start the public hearing, and think about it for neighbors, they have to come to how many meetings? It's a lot that they come to, and sometimes they have to wait and not even have an opportunity to speak. And so, you know, setting it up, this will be better for everyone.
Someone else.
Does anybody have any further questions just about the site plan? We've focused on O, and there's the timing. Design standards, I know we talked about that.
If I have one suggestion I like those time guidelines because a lot of processes are stringent in time it works for the applicant or a member or the board. Perhaps you may want to add something about an extension for just cause, because I see that language a lot in a lot of adjudicatory boards, because again, COVID's one of them, snowstorm, so you can add a sentence saying extension may be granted by the board upon a showing of just cause. And that leaves you enough discretion to determine what just cause is. Could be an applicant being sick or someone's in a hospital, but that's just a suggestion. And I see that regularly in the state regulations.
Could you just repeat that? Extension maybe
Maybe granted by the board upon a showing of just cause.
maybe granted to the board.
To the board or by the board if you want to grant it to an applicant, but enough flexibility for yourself and for the applicant, but leaving it at your discretion. And I see this all over the Mass Health regulations. It's all over.
Okay, and I'll run that by Tom.
So.
In justifying,
And a lot of
demonstrating just cause.
Yes.
That might be nice to have a good.
Yeah, just
We do
causes.
have, unless requested to do so in writing by the applicant,
Yeah, if you want, yeah.
which is in there.
It's in there.
Need something, I think it would be helpful to the planning board and.
For just cause. And then again, leaving it to your discretion so that you can decide. And if you need to continue something for just cause or an applicant upon a showing. And that showing can be anything.
Mm-hmm. We can look at that and ask town council about language to have that, because often what happens is it might be a peer review for the storm water, which has just taken longer. And so it's not anyone's fault. And so it's mutually agreeable that we're extending because we need this information. So that's good.
Yeah.
But that language will be helpful.
Any other questions about site plan? We're all good? Committee? Okay. Overlay.
Good. the overlay zoning in East Milton. So we had a public forum. The Warrant Committee get an invitation to that, to watch? If you did not, it's not too late. It was recorded. I would recommend watching the forum because it was our consultant was conducting the public forum, and it was very well received. A lot of East Milton neighbors were there. I received many comments later just saying how much they're looking forward to the overlay zoning in East Milton. We have, so I would say definitely watch it, but Nick Milano, town administrator, realizing how much was on the warrant committee at this time, had reached out and said, would the planning board be willing to move it to the June town meeting? So rather than have it on the May town meeting, have you all begin to look at everything. It's, there's a lot to it. There's a map, but having said that, it is not significantly different than the overlay zoning that we've done for the Milton Village. Matter of fact, a lot of the language that came, that's in the design guidelines, that's in the zoning, is the same thing that's in the Milton Village overlay zoning. And so this is a continuation of some planning process that has been going on for years. The history is part of the presentation, talking about the interest in this by the East Milton neighbors to do a mixed-use zoning, which will maintain the commercial, but increase the opportunity for housing, and including that in areas that are business district zoned primarily. So I would suggest watching that. It's something that we can come back to the warrant committee once you all have gotten through this Maytown meeting and all of these articles. We can come back and sit down with you after Maytown meeting and go through that. The language, the zoning language has already been sent over to you with the map, so you can start reviewing it now at this point, but I think it's really helpful to watch the public forum that was held last week, and which sort of walks through step by step the zoning.
I don't think I got a map. Did anybody get a map?
Okay. There will be a map to accompany it.
Yeah, we just got the draft, right?
It's required. That's why we had to actually add the maps at the last town
Brook
meeting.
Road, yeah.
Because it will need to be included.
Okay.
With that. Okay, so we'll make sure that that gets sent to you. So stay tuned on that one, and it's something I think the entire town is really going to embrace and look forward to. And MAPC was our consultant, and they actually drafted all the zoning language, and they are experts in doing this type of zoning for communities. So
I can remember when the initial conversations were beginning about this years back. Was MPIC involved in this a little bit, or no?
the funding
No.
for the study.
Yeah, the funding,
Funding, right.
and MPIC took the lead on the Milton Village one first. So MAPC, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, worked with us there. And so Josh Fiala, the representative, did both.
Yeah.
Can I just add
Yeah,
something
yeah,
to it? So just quickly, an overlay zoning means it sits on top of the existing zoning. So the existing zoning mostly here is business zoning. So those business uses, they're still allowed. They can do everything they can under, if this passes, nothing really changes for them unless they sell their property or they want to do something with the property themselves. This gives them another alternative. And this alternative allows them to do multifamily in conjunction with business. Ground floor business, 50%, I believe it is required if you're going to use this zoning, so that the streetscape, that we don't lose, retail spaces on the first floor, but allowing for multifamily on floors 2 and 3 above. One thing that's a little different about this than Milton Village is Milton Village has some bonus incentives that you can go another floor higher if you do more affordable units, or if you do historic preservation, or if you do some contributions to the public realm. What the public realm means is, like sidewalks and so forth, but in the case of like Milton Village, it also meant the parks and open space at Milton Landing. So that could apply, at some point down the road, if it was decided that you want to, East Milton wanted to look at those things as well. They're not part of this for now, so it's,
And The public clearly stated that they did
Yeah.
not want them to be
Yeah,
part of it.
yeah.
That's why. The
Yeah,
height was a big deal, where it was a little bit different in the Milton Village, because you have some really tall, high buildings, where it was, the residents, particularly in East Milton, were much more sensitive to the height, so that's why.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a distinction, because we said it's based on Milton Village,
Right.
and it is, but there
Right.
are those
There are some-
distinctions between them.
Yeah.
And so it's always the questions come up about an overlay and whether the existing businesses can be there. The other thing I think that's a little different is the kinds of businesses in this overlay are different than the underlying zoning, so you can't have a gas station, funeral home, a few things that you're currently allowed to have, and you still could. But if you took advantage of this mixed use, you wouldn't be able to. So those are, the 3 stories is all that's allowed here. There are, setback requirements, et cetera. But those are the primary, I'd say, the overarching things about the zoning.
Now, did you guys only get the zoning? Because I find what was helpful, what the consultants did.
And the
like
commentary.
guidelines, and
There was a
he
commentary.
provided Commentary as to why.
So I'll make sure that you all get that.
Zoning text.
Yeah, so it kind of was the background if you didn't want to watch it.
It is in there. I guess it is the commentary.
It's the commentary that's important.
No, they just have the language.
Yeah, it's just,
Just grab, I'll make sure you get the because the commentary is really helpful. It puts it in layman's terms. And so
that would be great.
it's online, so I'll make sure that that's sent over to you.
Yeah, I'm just thinking when you
And we
come,
want that to be sent to town meeting members as well, so making sure everybody has that before.
That's a good idea.
it'd be really helpful too when you come
Yep.
back. It might make it a lot
And town
quicker.
meeting members should really watch
And then
the
a
forum.
lot of your questions might be answered as to why we got
Exactly.
to that, where we ended up.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'll make sure that the commentary and the map is sent to you, and that there's a link also to that meeting for you.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair Hall. Appreciate that.
Good, yeah. It was all ready to go, but we understand there's a lot going on right now, so.
Like to discuss floodplain, might as well while we're here.
So that is really, it's sort of a housekeeping. There's some small state language changes from what we currently have a floodplain bylaw right now. This is simply, we've been asked to update the map for Milton, because some of those floodplain districts have changed. And so this is sort of a new updated map for the town, which really is important for those households who need to get a floodplain insurance. They need to know that floodplain insurance is required. So,
And there are some language adjustments, but those are also as recommended by
It's
DEP.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So it's pretty boilerplate from the state, pretty much. So more of a housekeeping, just to make sure we're updated.
So, just a question. Assuming those maps are going to be updated by FEMA from time to time, why do you make reference to a specific map rather than just the then current map as prescribed by FEMA? So that it is continually up to date rather than having to go back and update it.
I think it is, it's just something that we're required to let the town vote on, and it has to go through town meeting. I understand the process is an updated map.
Yeah, the state reviewed our bylaw and made the recommendations for the adjustments that are here.
But he's asking about the map.
Right, but here,
Yeah.
because there's a reference to a very specific.
No, but we're currently referencing it, but assuming that this is going to be a perpetual problem every time the map is updated, why not just make it a dynamic reference and just
I think
say...
that's a good question.
Yeah, I know, I think that would be good to ask town council that, if we're able to do that.
I think Cheyenne's had the discussions, our assistant town planner, or director of planning, assistant director of planning and community development, has had the discussions with the state. So I think that could be a question that gets sent back to Cheyenne to talk.
Because that way
Yeah.
you don't have to revisit this. And
Yeah.
Right.
assuming you want it in line and all the time, like
Right. Exactly. Yeah, that's, I'll ask, we'll get that
Yeah,
information.
that's why we just do building code and fire code.
Mhm.
That could be updated. And then we don't have to go back. So why not?
I wouldn't be surprised if there was some reference in some statute somewhere to a map. And that's why it's kind of always updating the maps. I remember this occurred, didn't we update these like 10 years ago?
We did, yeah.
Yeah, and I can remember I don't know, I'm just spitballing right now. But
Yeah, but it's a good question, because that's,
Because it says what dated July 8th, 2025.
Mhm. But they were reacting to the previous fixed map reference.
Right.
And if there's no
the language
reason,
be more,
yeah, if not
So
that,
what triggered this is a letter from the state to the select
Because they saw
board,
the
and then
then
got
current-
passed to the planning department, say you need to do this to update your bylaw, floodplain bylaw. So like that particular question is not one we asked of Cheyenne, so we have to go back and ask.
Okay.
We asked different kinds of questions, but
I just think of it like as an insurance issue. People want to see their house.
they did it to all,
it's all,
Yeah.
saying like,
all towns that have floodplain. This was also sent to all towns that have have floodplain areas. So this was not just they just didn't send it to Milton. Yeah,
FEMA updates the maps.
and it was sent to all affected towns. So like 19, 20 towns received this letter. It was not just Milton specific.
But the long and the short of it is, people who are in the floodplain need this to be correct in order
Yep.
to get floodplain insurance.
no,
Flood insurance, rather.
Right. Yeah, you weren't questioning.
makes total sense. And while it's, speaking of insurance, assuming that totally unrelated, but I was thinking back to a prior comment about just cause, but if there are town bylaws or regulations that run into weather or act of God related issues, I mean, you could consider just adding force majeure provisions to any of the act of God provisions to any of the laws, so that you have that
More of our
instant buffer.
general, yeah, in the general bylaw. That's a good question, and maybe the town clerk might be able to answer that, because I think there are emergency procedures for.
But if there are any-
Town
yeah.
meeting, or, or whatever it is, but.
But if there are any time-sensitive, time-regulated things that you have concerns around, weather, potentially,
Exactly.
just force majeure language
Yeah.
and pretty standard, commonly accepted.
Right, emergency.
any questions about the floodplain? Any other comments from planning board just regarding?
No.
Okay.
That should be pretty straightforward.
Okay, and I think that if we review,
Are we doing this tonight? Are we going through it tonight?
The floodplain article?
Yes. Or are we doing, is that in June?
this is a June.
Floodplain?
Floodplain is going to be May.
Oh, May.
Yeah,
So
so,
let's go through it.
Okay, then.
I'm sorry.
yes.
Got some typos?
Well, I have a question in A, section A. There is the flood insurance rate map, which is firm, and the flood insurance study, which is FIS. In the last sentence, you say the effective firm, FBFM, but I don't know what that is, and it wasn't defined in here. Does it need to be defined someplace to reference reference an acronym? Whereas the other two are referenced.
I would think so, yeah.
So, I don't know what you do with that,
What is FBFM?
but something.
That's a
You can blink FBFM.
town council, and this may be town administrator too, to look into this state, because it's a state mandate.
And then, at the end, it says, are incorporated herein by reference and are on file with the planning board, comma, inspectional services department. Is it both departments, planning board and inspectional services department? Or,
It's typically the
Flood
inspectional.
boundary and floodway maps.
so.
Maybe, read the context of the
It's in the last sentence.
sentence, yeah.
Yeah. Except
Another one,
it should be
NFIP.
an and, maybe.
Yes, that might be a mistake on
Somebody's part.
the section A.
I think we're going to have a few other questions, so maybe
Yeah,
we can make notations, or do you want to have?
yeah, if you make a
I'll just save a
comment-
copy.
Yeah.
I'm gonna call it WC.
So it
Yeah.
appears that FBFM is flood boundary and floodway map,
Oh, well, should it not be?
according to this, according to my Google search.
Yes.
I think we should add. And if you want to put an A in there, I think that's okay to insert that. Do you have it up right now?
And
Okay, so the mirror FB,
yes,
FM
any
panels,
And
Floodway is
inspectional
one
service.
word.
and
All
where
right.
is I putting A?
Oh, sorry, it was under
Yeah,
A,
I
but
feel
you
bad,
put
I
A
didn't
under the
choose
correct
my
place.
place.
Oh,
Yes.
And did you get rid of that comma after planning board?
Yes.
Thank you.
It's kind of hard to see.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so then you have a note about the FBF. And then under, is it under definitions, this is just another typo. Floodway,
flood boundary and floodway maps. They're mirrors to firms that floodplain administrators and other floodplain professionals use to manage floodplain development.
creek, or other watercourse. Okay. Is there a space there now? Is there a space
Under other water course?
after or? No, I can't
Or-
tell. It should.
Yeah, there might not be. I can put it in there.
Thanks. And then if you go down to historic structure, it's oh no, it looks like it was fixed. There's a space in between B and C. That's all I had.
I think we could spell out that definition. I highlighted the acronym.
The acronym, okay, so we can just make that clear.
Jog your
So-
memory. Yeah. Okay, great.
Okay, anyone else?
Anyone have it? Yeah. Any other questions, issues, or comments?
I hope all goes well at town meeting for you.
Thank you. Thank you all for all
you.
your time and all your excellent questions. So I appreciate that.
So I guess just as to the ADU and the site plan, okay, so are you going to go back to town council and ask for the short-term, like
Just a little
Airbnb?
language on those two items, yeah. Just if there's
Yes.
anything that he would want to modify to make that.
And then any of the adjustments in the ADU? I mean, not the ADU, the site plan?
I think the only thing that we were going to ask is that we could possibly put in an extension.
The just cause?
The just cause, an extension language, maybe.
And
we
also
might-
to look at that section
The appeal?
on the appeal.
Yeah, I have the appeal.
Right.
The chapter 40A language?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
section 17.
Section 17.
Yeah, exactly. So I have those three as there should only be three possible amendments.
Well, we had that one word was missing, complete, in complete application in section 0 also on decision. But that,
I don't think we need to, yeah.
we don't need town council for
Right,
that, but we
but
need
that
that
would be-
word inserted.
Correct, yes.
So you would take a vote after talking to the town council
On any language, yes, substantial.
on the amendments?
And we could probably,
When do you need this by?
we're meeting Monday and Thursday
Oh, okay.
of next week.
We would, I don't know, maybe it would be a good idea for us to vote on them in its entirety after you speak to town council. Okay. I just wanted to make sure we were on the same
Yep, that's great.
And Karen's going to share with you this copy that we're going
That's
through.
perfect, that I can
Okay.
send over, and, yeah, we can ask.
Okay, so we'll be in touch, I guess.
Yes, good.
And
Yeah, but I think we're
I think we're in a good
shape.
good-
It's just those, I think those are great points that people asked for.
And what we'll do is after our annual town meeting, we'll have you in briefly perhaps to answer some questions, but I think we'll be in a very good position to review the other two outstanding planning articles and give you any feedback if necessary.
Yeah, that's great. And please, yeah, you can go ahead and watch that. We'll send all those information and that link for everyone to be able to watch the forum from East Milton Overlay.
I
So,
really appreciate your time and
you.
your explanations and
much.
all your efforts. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good to see you all.
Thank you. Yeah.
I meant to ask.
Can I ask?
Oh. Well, it's kind of just like a.
You had a question?
Oh, I have a plan that I pulled up based upon Macy's comment, and I don't think there's a second story in it, but I wanted.
This
Like
is the
this.
actual,
That's
Yes.
the garage?
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks taller than that, but just by eye, but,
There's a stairway, but it doesn't look like the height is big enough.
It would all go through the building department, so.
so is anybody
if that
called
were-
the building department?
Do you think it's not being built to the specs?
I have, sometimes.
It might not be built,
Sometimes it's the grading too that raises it up and the perception of height. But in terms of that question about it's 26 feet to the ridge, so it's well within the height limit of 35 feet. But that discussion of the accessory, so, it would, if it were otherwise compliant, that height would be compliant. But let's say it were 950 square feet, now it wouldn't be protected, right? So,
it kicks it out of this.
but
This is a big
It would go through the ZBA.
garage.
yeah.
It may not be an ADU.
An
It could just be a
accessory structure, so you're asking whether that qualifies
billiard
as an
room.
accessory structure. Now, at 26 feet, it does not.
Deer heads.
It's taller than an accessory
That's a
structure.
Taller
Trophy,
than an
trophy.
accessory
it's
structure.
pretty-
So just on the accessory structure question, you could go back and ask the building department, was this approved as an accessory structure, or was there a variance for the height?
It's a pretty fancy garage.
And then the issue comes up when they go for their occupancy permit, and if they exceed it, then they have to go to get a variance. And then, my understanding, in my knowledge, it usually gets approved because it's already been built. When if they apply for a variance first, they may not have received it, depending on the input from the neighbors.
Risky.
So it depends on the jurisdictions. I've seen if somebody's off by inches, the building department will make them take it down to the right height or move it into the right setbacks. So it really is a question of, it must have been approved, the plans, or they wouldn't be building it. The question is, did the building official make a mistake or did they get a variance?
And it comes down to grading, because we had a house in my neighborhood years and years ago. It was new, but they ran into a grading and ledge, so they built the house according to the height, but it actually was too tall, and it was, they didn't take it down. The neighbors supported it. It was an accident.
Right.
Thank you.
Planning board,
Thank
very
you.
much. We appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, good night. Thank you.
Okay. Julia.
Just wondering, and trying to take lessons from the last time, do we want to assign people to comments now for some of these things, even though we haven't necessarily seen the final version, but...
No, that's a good idea because if someone's writing the comment, I want them to sort of think about it. Brian wrote our last ones. I would give Brian the right of refusal since he already kind of put it together with the changes.
I have a choice?
there he is. Hey, Brian.
Sure. When you need it by?
It's a great picture.
I don't know, next week, Brian?
Friday.
The ADU, right?
Yeah, the ADU and the site plan, I mean, I assume, other than town council and maybe his suggestions or specific language changes, they're basically the same. Is that fair?
Yeah, except I would also say that they incorporated the changes that were recommended at town meeting so that everybody calms down about.
Oh, yeah, I mean, of course, Brian, everything that they've changed.
Yeah.
And, there were really two proponents of a lot of these changes at town meeting, and those were accepted. But I mean, by and large, it is very similar.
Okay, got it. Paste and copy.
Almost.
Oh, copy paste.
I'm not looking to have them come back in. Are we good with that? On these two?
Yeah.
Okay,
Unless
so
town council says something, yes, that's fine.
we don't have much time. So we're going to come back in with them, or we'll come back in with the language. We'll obviously have it distributed early enough. So if anyone here has a major issue, we can try to address it either prior to the meeting or very briefly in the meeting before that. So we're feeling pretty good about these. I think the other two will be relatively easy after we've done our review. I think the overlay, a lot of those questions will be answered. They've been working on this thing for years, as they said. Big night tomorrow night. We got schools coming in. We are not meeting on Wednesday. We are meeting on Thursday. We had the police and fire coming in. Fire needs to reschedule.
Fire or DPW?
DPW can't come in until the following week.
So police and fire are coming in, or?
Just
Fire needs to reschedule, so only police are coming in on Thursday. I'm gonna try to see if someone else can come in. And then we really just have after this week, next week. So I'm gonna be trying, is there anybody that anyone would like to hear from in the next couple of weeks specifically?
Judy's hand is raised, I'm not sure.
Anyone here?
Answer your question.
Would anyone like to hear from the library? If I can get the library in?
Maybe hear from the Board of Health, because I did see the email about it was about a position that might be abolished. That's really important, because I think I got an email with Ronald. It was about from a Caroline Kinsella from the Board of Health about the potential elimination of the health agent position.
Okay.
So I'd be interested to kind of.
Yeah, we asked the director of the Board of Health what the impact would be if we were to if the town were not to pass the override. And there would be one layoff of the health inspector, was it a role? Health agent?
Health agent, yep.
She gave us a summary of what that person does, so we could read it, or we can have her come in. She said she'd be happy to come in, but she wrote a letter to explain what the impact is on the neighborhood.
Is this, sorry to interrupt, is this have to do with, I don't know if anything that's going on in the federal government that's kind of affecting us on the local level, is that what it is?
This would be if the town doesn't pass the override, and there'd be layoffs.
Got it.
Downsizing the current staff, so.
Can you share that letter with?
Yeah, I just sent it to Tom. We can.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
It just lays out what she does. She inspects restaurants. She inspects a lot of stuff. And it's like,
So a significant position within the town.
no eating out.
That was a pretty soft roll up to.
Props on the build-up to that. That was great.
I agree.
I was walking out the door.
Just read the letter.
It was like health inspector, yeah, COVID's over.
Yeah, but these are the points. I mean, these are like some serious things. I mean, if we look
makes
at the
sense, yeah.
overrides for general town, they are they're minuscule, right? They're looking 1%, 2%, 4% increases per budget. I think the one might have had 14, but I mean, they are very, very small. But obviously, like issues like that, I mean, it would be obviously of great significance. So I can talk to the Board of Health.
She said she'd be willing to come in if you want,
Yeah.
but we can look at the letter too.
Of course.
And also,
Is it a long letter?
No, one page.
I've also been to some restaurants in town that's been pretty suspect with,
Here we go.
like, no, seriously.
We do our own investigation here.
Yeah, so.
But yeah, and I know that is a question I think that people bring up, like who's looking at the restaurants, especially in light of that planning board hearing several months ago up in the square with the trash and everything. So I'm going to try to get some people in and fill the hole for Thursday. We're going to meet next week. I don't have a copy of the draft warrant yet for the consent agenda and some of the other articles. Once I get a copy of that, either myself or Karen will forward it to you immediately so we can begin to go through some of those more of the typical historical articles that we go through and need to approve or put a recommendation in for town meeting to approve. So school's tomorrow, meeting on Thursday, and next week is to be determined. But I'll try to consider at the very least, a Monday, Wednesday meeting. And maybe one or two more based upon what I get from the town administrator in terms of the warrant. Comments are due first week of April. I know schools have already mentioned that comment to you. Again, if you want, I know schools is coming in tomorrow, but there's a lot of information.
Tom?
Yes?
This is Jay.
Yeah, Jay.
Sorry to interrupt. I got a text from Chair Carroll, who was watching the meeting, and she was under the impression that schools were gonna ask for a few more days. They're still finalizing their FY25 numbers. Take this as the third-hand information it is, but the short version is I think they want a few more days before they come to us. I can't hear anything.
No one's saying anything, Jay.
Everyone's stunned.
Stunned us into silence.
You did a mic drop.
She said you might have gotten some emails from Mark to this effect.
I don't
Mark
have
Lauren?
anything.
Just virtually throwing up her hands.
I guess I did. Okay. So based upon that news, I'm going to cancel tomorrow night.
Can fire come tomorrow?
These are going to be things I cannot make a decision on right now. I have to call and email and set things up. So
It's not in the agenda, right?
agenda set for tomorrow, so that's a cancel for tomorrow.
But don't we list all the,
Yeah, I mean,
if he could come, the fire? Just saying.
this is going to be a change in the agenda. I can't do that and put fire on and just totally take schools off. So
no tomorrow night.
So no tomorrow night.
Okay.
Next meeting's Thursday.
Next meeting we have is on Thursday.
Maybe schools can come in.
Maybe I'll email them.
Thanks, Jay.
Yeah, appreciate it, Jay. It's kind of good knowing now, I guess.
Tom?
Judy.
Thank you. In regards to the schools, I have a question for the warrant committee members that go to the school committee finance. Was there anything from today's meeting that might be helpful for us to know about before they come in?
No, they have just not made that the same conversation I shared last week is kind of where we were again today.
Okay, thank you very much.
So no decision, thus, that's why they're still meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone have anything else they'd like to discuss or talk about? Do you have a motion? Second?
Second.
Macy, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks.
Someone wants to know so I can send you.